was one of those nights that felt longer than it should have been. The airport buzzed with restless travelers, the sound of rolling suitcases and murmured complaints blending with the rain hammering the glass walls. I sat near Gate 12 staring at the flickering departure board that had been blinking delayed for the past 2 hours. My phone battery was at 6%, and I'd already scrolled through every app I owned twice. I wasn't supposed to be here this late. My flight home had been delayed, then delayed again until the announcement finally came that it was canceled altogether. A storm had swallowed the city in sheets of cold rain, and the next available flight wasn't until morning. I leaned back in the hard plastic chair inside. My shoulders ached from carrying my laptop bag all day. 3 weeks on the road for work had left me drained. Too many polite handshakes, too many fake smiles. I just wanted to be home. That's when I noticed him. He entered the terminal like a man late to his own story, tall, hurried, dressed in a Navy pilot uniform that looked slightly undone. His tie hung loose, his hair damp from the rain, and he was muttering something under his breath as he checked his watch. The silver wings pinned to his chest caught the overhead light as he walked quickly toward the counter. "I'm sorry, Captain, but that connection left 20 minutes ago," the clerk said, her voice apologetic but firm. The pilot rubbed the back of his neck, frustration etched across his face. "There has to be something, another connection, another route." "Not tonight," she replied. "The weather grounded almost everything. You'll have to wait until morning." I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but it was hard not to. His tone wasn't angry, just defeated, the kind of tired that went beyond sleep. The clerk added, "We've arranged hotel vouchers for passengers. There's a shuttle outside, but most rooms are already taken." That was my cue. I stood up, my own voucher crumpled in hand, and moved toward the counter. "Sir, you might want to hurry," she told me. "Only one room left at the hotel near the airport." The pilot exhaled sharply, glanced at me, and then back at the clerk. "One room?" "Yes, sir." He looked back at me again, really looked this time. His eyes were a shade of blue that reminded me of the sky before a storm, and his jaw flexed slightly as if he were weighing something. Then he said it. "Well, we could share if you don't mind." For a moment I thought he was joking. I blinked. "Share?" He shrugged, one corner of his mouth tilting into an easy, lopsided grin. "It's either that or one of us sleeps on the terminal floor. I promise I don't snore. Much." I hesitated, glancing between him and the clerk, who looked like she'd seen this kind of awkward negotiation before. My brain scrambled for an excuse, but exhaustion won over pride. "Fine," I muttered. "As long as you're not a serial killer." He chuckled, extending his hand. "Daniel, commercial pilot. Clean record last I checked." I shook it reluctantly, my fingers brushing the faint roughness of his palm. "Eli." "Nice to meet you, Eli." Outside, the rain had turned into a steady curtain, the kind that soaked you in seconds. We boarded the shuttle, just the two of us, and sat in silence as the driver maneuvered through puddled streets toward the dimly lit hotel. Daniel leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Without the airport chaos around him, he looked softer, human, almost vulnerable. I caught myself staring and quickly looked away, pretending to watch the raindrops racing down the window. "You travel for work?" he asked, voice low, breaking the silence. "Yeah," I said. "Tech conference." "Nothing exciting?" "Could have fooled me," he said, his lips curving into a small smile. "You look like you've been running flight schedules too." I laughed under my breath. "Feels like it." The shuttle stopped in front of the hotel, a tired-looking building with flickering neon lights and the faint smell of wet carpet drifting through the doors. Inside, the lobby was crowded with stranded passengers. But the receptionist confirmed what we already knew. One room left. Daniel handled the paperwork with a calm efficiency, glancing at me once before pocketing the keycard. "Room 214, he said. We took the elevator in silence. My heart thudded quietly in my chest, an odd mix of nerves and curiosity. I told myself it was just a room, just one night. But the thought of sharing it with a stranger, especially him, felt oddly charged. When the elevator doors slid open, we stepped into a dim corridor lined with humming lights and old wallpaper. Daniel walked ahead, his shoulders squared, the soft scent of rain and aftershave lingering in the air between us. At the door, he glanced back at me with that same faint smile. "Well," he said, sliding the keycard. "Guess fate's got a sense of humor." The lock clicked open. The door swung wide. Inside, the room was smaller than expected, Warm, clean, but undeniably limited. One neatly made bed stood in the center. He set his bag down by the wall, loosened his tie completely, and said with a light, teasing sigh, "One bed's fine. Make room." I couldn't help it. I laughed, shaking my head. "You're unbelievable." "Thanks," he said, smiling as he sat on the edge of the bed, brushing a hand through his damp hair. "You'll see. I'm great company once you get used to me." I dropped my bag beside the chair and crossed my arms. "We'll see about that." He looked up at me, and for a brief second our eyes met. Steady, curious, almost electric. Then he leaned back against the headboard, closing his eyes with a sigh of exhaustion. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, but inside, the silence stretched, comfortable and strange all at once. I turned off the light near the door, leaving only the soft glow of the lamp by the bed. We hadn't spoken again, but something unspoken filled the space between us, like the quiet before takeoff. As I climbed into bed, careful to stay on my side, I caught one last glimpse of him in the amber light, his tie undone, his face peaceful for the first time that night. We lay there in silence, the storm murmuring against the window. Two strangers, one missed flight and a feeling I couldn't quite name yet. Something waiting quietly in the air between us. The door closed behind us with a soft click, muffling the sound of the rain outside. The room was smaller than I expected. One bed in the center, a small table by the window, and the faint hum of the old air conditioner filling the silence. The light above the bed cast a warm, amber glow that made everything feel softer, almost unreal after the chaos of the airport. Daniel dropped his overnight bag near the dresser, shrugged off his jacket, and loosened his tie completely. He moved, with a kind of quiet ease, unhurried but confident, like he'd been through 100 nights like this before. I, on the other hand, stood frozen near the door, clutching my bag like I might need to flee at any moment. He turned toward me, eyebrows raised slightly. "You can breathe, you know. I don't bite." I laughed awkwardly. "Just adjusting. Didn't think I'd be sharing a room with a stranger tonight." He smiled, setting his pilot's cap on the nightstand. "I've been called worse than a stranger." Then he sat down at the edge of the bed, pulling off his shoes and wiggling his toes with a sigh that sounded like relief itself. There was something oddly magnetic about the way he existed in the space, completely at ease, like he carried his own gravity. His white shirt was half untucked now, sleeves rolled up just below his elbows, revealing forearms dusted with light hair. I caught myself staring longer than I should have and quickly turned toward the window, pretending to be fascinated by the rain streaking down the glass. "Long day?" he asked. "Longest," I replied, setting my bag on the table. "You?" 3 flights, 2 delays, 1 angry passenger who thought I could control the weather. He chuckled softly. "Guess even pilots have limits." That made me smile. I can't imagine flying for a living. He leaned back against the headboard, folding his arms behind his head. "You get used to it, then again." His voice softened a little. "Lately, I've been feeling more grounded than I'd like. It's weird, you know? You spend your life in the air and one day you realize you've forgotten what it's like to actually land somewhere that feels like home." His words hung there for a moment, gentle, unguarded. I found myself sitting on the other edge of the bed before I even realized it. "I get that," I said quietly. "I'm not a pilot, but I spend so much time working, traveling, staring at screens that sometimes I forget what living feels like. It's like my life's on autopilot." He looked at me then and his smile turned softer. "Autopilot, huh? You speak my language." That made both of us laugh, breaking the heaviness of the moment. I rummaged through my bag and found a half-eaten chocolate bar from the airport. I held it up. "Dinner?" He grinned. "Gourmet. You always eat like this?" "Only on stormy nights when I'm stranded with pilots." He laughed again, and this time it was a full sound, rich, warm, real. It echoed in the small room like something alive. I tore the wrapper and handed him a piece. For a while we just sat there, sharing chocolate and small talk, swapping pieces of our lives like trading cards. He told me about the time he accidentally called the wrong tower frequency and ended up talking to a confused fishing boat captain. I told him about my disastrous first presentation where I'd spilled coffee all over my boss's laptop. We both laughed until the tension between us began to melt into something easier, something quietly comforting. At one point, he got up and found a small coffee maker near the sink. 2 cups, he said, glancing at me. Black? Lots of sugar, I corrected. He smirked. Sweet tooth. Noted. He handed me the steaming cup, his fingers brushing mine. It was a small touch. Accidental maybe, but it sent a flicker of warmth through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. We drank in silence for a while, listening to the rain. I studied him from the corner of my eye, the way the light caught his profile, the slight stubble along his jaw, the faint lines near his eyes that hinted at long days and early flights. There was something deeply human about him, something that made me want to know more. Can I ask you something? I said after a moment. He looked over. Sure. Are you ever scared? Up there? His brow furrowed slightly as if he'd never been asked that before. Sometimes, he admitted. Not of flying, though. I'm scared of what happens when I stop, when the world gets quiet. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. I've always been afraid of flying, I confessed. Every time the plane shakes, I think, this is it. But I keep doing it anyway. He smiled faintly. That's brave, I huffed a laugh. Or stupid. Maybe both, he said. But sometimes stupid things get us where we're meant to be. Something about the way he said it made me look at him again. His gaze was steady, calm, but there was something behind it, a softness I hadn't seen before. The kind of look that makes you forget what you were about to say. The clock on the nightstand glowed past midnight. The rain had softened into a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat against the window. Daniel stretched, his shirt pulling slightly at the shoulders as he moved. We should try to get some sleep, he said, his voice low, almost gentle. I nodded, trying to ignore the sudden rush of nerves. He stood, flicked off the main light, and the room fell into a soft twilight glow. He pulled back the blanket, glanced over at me with a teasing smirk, and said again, "One bed's fine, make room." I rolled my eyes, pretending to groan. "You're not going to let that go, are you?" "Not a chance," he murmured, slipping beneath the covers on his side. I climbed in carefully, making sure to keep a safe distance, a solid 2 feet between us. The sheets were warm from the heater, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and rain. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I could hear the quiet rhythm of his breathing, the faint rustle of the blanket when he shifted slightly. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It felt alive, charged. At one point, I turned my head slightly and saw him looking up at the ceiling, his expression calm, content. He must have sensed me watching because his lips curved into a half smile. "Good night, Eli," he said softly. "Good night, Captain," I whispered back. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle. The hum of the air conditioner filled the space between our breaths. And somewhere in that quiet, just before sleep, I realized something strange. I didn't feel like I was afraid of flying anymore. The clock glowed past midnight in soft blue digits. I was still awake. The rain had quieted to a whisper against the window, but the world outside still felt heavy with it, like the storm hadn't really gone, just settled down to listen. The room was dim, the only light coming from the street lamps outside, faint and golden through the thin curtains. Daniel's breathing was steady beside me. For a while I tried to match it. Inhale when he inhaled, exhale when he did, but it didn't help. My body was tired, but my mind was wide awake, restless in that strange space between comfort and awareness. I turned slightly, careful not to make a sound. He was lying on his back, one arm resting across his chest, his face turned toward the ceiling. Even in the dim light, I could see the slow rise and fall of his chest, the relaxed curve of his mouth. "You're still awake," he said quietly, eyes still closed. I froze. "You could tell?" He chuckled softly, his voice low and rough from sleep. "You're breathing too carefully."
"Only awake people breathe like that," I smiled in the dark.
"Guess I'm not good at pretending." He shifted, turning his head slightly toward me. "Something keeping you up?" Just my brain, I said. It doesn't shut off easily. Tell me about it. He sighed, the sound soft and almost sad. Half the time I land, my body's in one city and my mind's still 1,000 miles away. There was a pause, long enough that I thought he might have drifted off again. But then he spoke, his voice even quieter. Can I tell you something? Sure. He turned fully onto his side, facing me. The space between us shrank a little, though neither of us moved closer. Sometimes I think the hardest part of flying isn't the sky, it's the ground. You spend all your time learning how to keep control, how to stay calm no matter what happens. You tell people they're safe even when you're not sure you believe it, and then you go home and suddenly no one needs you to be calm anymore. You're just there. Empty. His words hit something in me I didn't expect. I could hear the quiet ache under his composure. That sounds lonely, I said softly. It is. He exhaled, eyes flicking toward the ceiling again. People think it's all adventure and freedom, but it's a lot of hotels, airports, faces you never see twice. You learn how to smile through everything because that's the job. But sometimes, he stopped, searching for the words. Sometimes you forget who you are when no one's watching. I lay still, listening. The rhythm of the rain picked up again, like the sky had decided to join the conversation. I get that, I said quietly. I mean, in my own way. I work in tech. It's all numbers, screens, deadlines. I talk to people all day, but it's not real talking. I've got friends, co-workers, but I can go weeks without anyone actually seeing me. He looked at me then, really looked, even in the dim light. That sounds lonely too, I laughed softly. Guess we're a pair of lonely travelers. He smiled, but it was small, wistful. Maybe that's why the storm grounded us, to remind us that even strangers need someone sometimes. We fell quiet for a while, the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty, just full of unspoken things. My eyes had adjusted to the dark now, enough to make out the lines of his face, the sharp jaw, the small crease between his brows, the faint stubble that caught the faintest glint of light. I realized he was closer than I thought. His hand was resting between us, fingers relaxed, almost touching mine. He broke the silence with a question that didn't sound casual at all. You ever had someone who just made the world stop for a moment? The question settled between us like a held breath. I didn't answer right away. My throat felt dry. I don't know, I said finally. Maybe once. But it never lasted. Life started moving again before I could even understand what I was feeling. He nodded slowly, as if he knew exactly what I meant. Yeah, the world always starts moving again. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The distance between our hands felt smaller, the air thicker. And then, without really thinking about it, I shifted slightly, brushing my fingers against his. Just enough to feel warmth, the faint pulse of another person alive beside me. He didn't move away. For a heartbeat, we stayed like that, barely touching, but somehow that single, quiet contact said everything words couldn't. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. It wasn't even intentional. It was human, and it was enough. I don't usually talk like this, he murmured. I don't either. He smiled faintly, eyes still open, voice barely a whisper. Guess the storm's good for something. I smiled back even though he couldn't see it. Guess so. The rain outside deepened again, soft and rhythmic, as though the sky was breathing with us. Slowly the silence settled in, comfortable now, almost fragile. His fingers brushed mine again, lighter this time, and stayed there. My chest felt warm, my mind strangely calm. The kind of calm you get when you finally stop running from yourself. After a while, his breathing evened out again. I watched him for a few seconds, the way his lips parted slightly in sleep, the faint rise and fall of his chest. I turned onto my side to face him fully. Our hands were still close, still almost touching. For a long time I just lay there, listening to the sound of rain, the hum of the heater, the steady rhythm of his breathing. And somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, I drifted off too, facing him, the storm outside fading into a distant lullaby. For the first time in a long while, I didn't dream of falling. I dreamed of landing. The morning crept in gently, spilling soft gold across the small hotel room. For a long while, I didn't move. I was caught between waking and dreaming, until I realized that something heavy, warm, and solid was draped over my waist, the pilot's arm. It wasn't a tight hold, just a loose, natural sprawl that somehow felt right. His slow, even breaths brushed against the back of my neck, and the scent of his cologne, something faintly woody, like cedar and rain, lingered in the air. I told myself to shift away, to quietly slip out of the bed before he woke up. But my body betrayed me. I stayed still. Maybe it was the warmth, or maybe it was the feeling of being seen, even in silence. For once I didn't feel invisible. When he stirred, his arm tightened instinctively for a split second before he pulled it back with a soft grunt. I turned over, pretending to just wake up, but our eyes met, his slightly puffy from sleep, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "Well," he said, voice rough from the night. "Guess I missed more than my flight." The joke broke the tension and I laughed, maybe too quickly, too nervously. But he grinned wider, rubbing the back of his neck. "Sorry about that. Must have rolled over." "Yeah, sure," I said, teasing gently. "Gravity, right?" He chuckled, the sound low and genuine, and sat up. Sunlight touched his hair, golden brown now instead of the deep amber of last night, and I noticed a dimple appear near his cheek when he smiled. I hated how easily my chest tightened at the sight. The air between us wasn't awkward anymore, just fragile, like something new that neither of us wanted to name. We took turns in the bathroom, trying not to bump into each other in the tiny space, laughing when we inevitably did. He hummed softly while brushing his teeth, some old tune I couldn't place. I caught my reflection in the mirror and almost didn't recognize myself. A guy smiling before noon, relaxed, almost content. Downstairs, the hotel served a complimentary breakfast that tasted like cardboard and comfort at once. We found a small table by the window, plates piled high with eggs and toast neither of us really ate. Outside, the world looked freshly washed, puddles shining like mirrors, planes taking off one by one now that the storm had cleared. "So," I asked between sips of coffee, "do pilots ever actually get to enjoy breakfast like this?" He smirked. "Only when we miss our flights." "Lucky me then," I said before I could stop myself. He looked up from his cup, holding my gaze for a moment that stretched longer than it should have. There was something unspoken there, gratitude, maybe curiosity, or something softer that I didn't dare hope for. When he finally glanced at his watch, I felt the spell break. "Next flight leaves in a few hours," he said quietly. "Right," I replied, forcing a smile. "Duty calls." We walked to the shuttle in silence, our footsteps echoing against the wet pavement. The air smelled of jet fuel and rain, and every passing minute felt heavier than it should. I wanted to say something, anything, to make him stay. But what right did I have? He was a pilot, after all. He belonged to the sky. At the curb, he turned to me. His tie was back on, neat and tight, but his eyes looked softer than before. "If I hadn't missed that flight," he said, "I'd never have met you." My chest tightened. "Then maybe you should miss more flights." He laughed, that same easy, golden laugh from the night before. And for a second, he looked like he wanted to say something else. But then the shuttle driver called his name and reality returned like a gust of wind. He hesitated, reached out and touched my shoulder. Just once. Light, fleeting, but enough to send every nerve awake. "Take care, all right?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. And then he was gone, suitcase rolling behind him, sunlight catching the edge of his jacket as he climbed aboard. I watched until the shuttle disappeared around the corner, leaving me standing there alone but somehow not empty. As I turned back toward the hotel, I caught myself smiling. The world felt a little brighter, a little warmer. Maybe it was ridiculous. Two strangers sharing a night in a bed, connected by coincidence. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I'd missed something. Maybe, just maybe, I'd found something instead. When he left, the world seemed to deflate around me. The hotel lobby felt too still, the hum of suitcase wheels too hollow. Even the soft murmur of travelers checking in sounded like background noise to a scene I was no longer a part of. I told myself it was nothing, a brief moment of connection born out of bad weather and shared inconvenience. People drift in and out of our lives all the time. That's what I said. That's what I wanted to believe. But every time I walked past the airport window later that day, I caught myself glancing at the sky, wondering which one of those silver wings he was on. Daniel. The name stuck in my head like a song lyric I couldn't shake. The days that followed blurred together. Back to work, back to the hum of fluorescent lights and the quiet loneliness of typing in an empty apartment. The storm had passed, but somehow everything inside me still felt unsettled. I told myself to stop checking my phone. I told myself he wasn't going to call, that pilots don't look back. Still, I scrolled through my recent texts, stared at my empty inbox, and reread old messages just to fill the space where I wanted his name to appear. It was pathetic. I knew that. But loneliness doesn't always listen to reason. Then, one evening, 3 days later, my phone buzzed while I was doing dishes. Unknown number. This is Captain Daniel, and I found your number on the hotel receipt. You still afraid of flying? For a second, I just stood there, hands dripping soap and heart pounding hard enough to drown out the sound of everything else. I wiped my hands and typed back before I could overthink it. Still terrified, especially of pilots who steal the last room at a hotel. His reply came almost instantly. Steal? I distinctly remember offering to share. And snoring. That's a lie. I was merely breathing enthusiastically. You mean loudly. Loudly and attractively. That conversation became a thread that pulled me out of my routine. One message turned into 10. 10 turned into nightly chats. The teasing didn't stop, but somewhere between jokes and confessions, the tone changed, softened. He told me about his roots, about the quiet thrill of flying over cities asleep under cloud cover. I told him about my small life, my desk job, my fear of turbulence, my inability to make coffee without spilling it. Some nights we talked until our words slurred from exhaustion. Once he called just to say goodnight because he couldn't sleep without the sound of me rambling. I laughed, but inside something shifted, something I couldn't name yet. He was thousands of feet above me most days, living a life of altitude and arrival gates. And yet, through the glow of our phones, it felt like he was closer than anyone had been in years. A week passed before the message came. I've got a stopover near your city next week. Thought maybe we could test your flying phobia again? Maybe over coffee this time? I stared at the message for a long time, feeling my pulse thrum in my throat. It shouldn't have scared me as much as it did, and it was just coffee. But part of me feared that maybe what we had was safer through screens, preserved in the soft blur of memory and distance. What if the magic disappeared under daylight? What if he was just being kind? But another part of me, the part that still remembered the warmth of his arm across my waist, whispered that some chances don't come twice. So I said yes. And now, here I am, 1 week later, standing at the arrivals gate, trying not to look as nervous as I feel. My hands are trembling slightly, the paper cups warm against my palms. The terminal is busy, families reuniting, kids holding balloons, the smell of coffee and jet fuel thick in the air. Every time the automatic doors slide open, my chest tightens a little more, and then I see him. The same easy smile, the same calm stride, but when his eyes find mine, something in them softens, like he's been looking for me too. He spots the 2 coffees in my hands and grins. I hope one's not decaf, he says. I laugh, the sound shaky but real. Only if you promise not to miss this flight. He steps closer, and for a moment we just stand there in the noisy crowd, caught between what was and what could be. The world feels smaller again, but not emptier this time, not at all. He spotted me before I even saw him clearly. Daniel was still in uniform, navy jacket, gold-trimmed shoulders, and that tie I remembered him loosening on that rainy night. His bag swung at his side, his hair a little messy from travel, and that same tired but magnetic smile broke across his face like sunlight through clouds. Then he started running. I didn't have time to think or brace before his arms were around me, tight, warm, and certain. The smell of rain and jet fuel and him hit me all at once. For a moment, the terminal disappeared. The crowd, the noise, the distance, all of it fell away. You're real, he murmured against my shoulder. I laughed into his jacket. You sound surprised. I just didn't want to wake up and find this was still the hotel room. We stood there, still holding on, until someone bumped past and we both stepped back, grinning like idiots. His eyes searched mine, like he was memorizing every line of my face. Coffee's probably cold, I said finally, lifting the 2 cups. He chuckled, taking one. Doesn't matter. You're here. We walked out of the airport together, talking nonstop, words tumbling over each other like we were afraid to waste a single second. He told me about his last few flights, how he kept looking out the cockpit window, imagining me below somewhere, maybe looking up. I told him how my coworkers thought I'd been strangely cheerful all week. We ended up by the small observation deck just outside the terminal, where planes lifted gracefully into the blue one after another. Daniel leaned against the railing beside me, eyes following a silver aircraft climbing into the clouds. "Did you really just happen to have a stopover here?" I asked, teasing. He hesitated, then smiled, shyly this time. "No, I might have requested the route change." I turned to face him fully. "You what?" He shrugged, trying to play it off. "Paperwork's a nightmare, but worth it." "Why?" I asked, though I already knew. He exhaled slowly, gaze dropping to the ground before finding mine again. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you." The air between us tightened. His voice softened, careful, vulnerable. "I've flown over 100 cities," he said quietly, "but none of them felt like home until you." The words hit me like the first breath after turbulence. Unexpected, steadying. I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint gold in his irises. "Then don't miss this flight," I said, barely above a whisper. He smiled. That slow, dawning smile I'd seen in the dim light of a hotel room, and then he leaned in. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't perfect either. It was real. Soft, hesitant at first, then deeper, certain. His hand slid to the back of my neck, and everything around us, the noise, the planes, the chatter, blurred into quiet. For the first time, neither of us was running. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, laughing under his breath. "You realize you're never getting rid of me now, right?" "I'm counting on it," I said. Months later, I found myself in a place I never thought I'd be. 30,000 feet above ground, sitting in the jump seat of a small regional jet. The cockpit hummed with soft beeps and distant radio chatter. Daniel sat beside me, focused but calm, his hand occasionally brushing mine as he adjusted controls. The view outside was endless, clouds rolling like waves, sunlight spilling gold across the sky. "Still afraid of flying?" he asked, glancing at me with that familiar grin. I smiled back. "Not anymore." He reached over, squeezing my hand gently before turning back to the controls. "Good. You're safe with me." And I believed him. As the engines roared and the horizon stretched wide before us, I thought about how it all began. A storm, a missed flight, one bed, two strangers who should have never met. He missed his flight that night. And somehow that's how we both finally landed.